All right, so I gotta ask. Do you have a brother?
Yeah, yeah, I know. I heard you're on Sportsology a while
Yeah.
ago with my
So
brother.
it was so funny because when you reached out to us, I scanned through your profile and I'm like, dude, I was like, this is weird. I'm like, I swear I know this guy, but then I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think his name was Taylor. And then I'm like, oh my god. I was like, so what's the age difference?
So we're 4 birth years apart, but it's closer to 5 because I'm a January birthday and he's a December.
Okay.
So yeah, it was funny when I told him I was coming on the podcast because I remember he interviewed you a while ago. I mentioned to him and right away he's like, "Oh, great dude, great dude." So it was pretty funny how that worked out. But yeah, he's doing some more sport media stuff, making a lot of TikToks and debriefing different trending topics. So it's been fun for him lately.
Yeah, I saw that my favorite TikTok of his is that one of the dads in the corner. I think that was him, right? Where he like does like
Yeah.
five different poses of like a classic hockey dad
I,
watching from
I
the
think I've
corner.
seen that one. I
Yeah.
saw that one, I think, yeah.
I was like
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was, but my dad was like the epitome of the one.
Oh, there's the stretcher, there was the glass banger, there was arms crossed with the aggressive gum chewing. Oh, there was a bunch. There's
That
a
was my
bunch.
dad's the arm cross, aggressive gum chewing. Especially if I wasn't playing well, like I would know I like the harder he was chewing his gum, it was
Oh
the
yeah.
worse I was playing. Yeah.
my
Oh yeah.
dad my dad usually like he would be if things were good he would kind of just be nonchalant, but as soon as he was into it and you could tell when he was into it it was either a really good game or a really bad game, he would like
Yeah.
put his elbow on the glass like where it meets the glass and like just like put his hand right here and just like show no emotion. And I was like, okay, I gotta either figure it out or I gotta either keep it going. But anyways, Taylor,
Yeah, yeah.
it's an absolute pleasure to have you. And yeah, I guess we kind of just wanted to start with where you at now and like what's been going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So presently I'm running a company called Upper Mentality where I do mental performance consulting for a wide range of athletes, predominantly hockey players, from professional right down to youth sport, just helping them learn the mental skills that I wish I knew growing up, just how to build confidence, what mental toughness really is, etc. So I've been doing that since I finished up grad school, as well as during grad school. But I really started to, um, well, I had more time in my hands, so I started to really market it more and pour more time and effort into it. And I'm really excited to see what's next for Upper Mentality.
Why the mental health space? What's like sport background? Maybe give us your sport background and like is this something that you've always wanted to do or as you sort of kind of experience these different emotions and whatever like to your own sport? Was it more of an interest as you start to learn more?
Yeah, that's a good question. Growing up, I always played hockey. Never had the wheels to play at a super high level. I was, we talked about the hockey dad gestures. For me, it was always this one: move your feet, kind of thing. But yeah, like for me, like just as I started to realize that hockey wasn't going to be something I was going to do long term, and just became more for fun. Really, in high school, um, I knew I wanted to pursue a career in sports. Now, what that looked like, I wasn't quite sure because for me, it was like, oh, like, do I want to be an agent? Do I want to be a physiotherapist? And I came across sports psychology, and I'm like, this is really cool. I get to work with athletes, but also like help coach them and help them work through maybe problems or issues. And that really appealed to me just because growing up, I was always that person who people knew they could come to if they needed to talk about something. And so I did my undergrad in sports psychology, got my first taste of consulting in my 4th year, and then decided to go on and do a master's and go on to become an accredited mental performance consultant, where my work is subclinical. So I'm not qualified to work directly with mental health. However, the mental skills I teach can also have a positive impact on an athlete's mental health. But yeah, I don't know. I just think growing up, like I was never one of those players who always had a spot on the team. Like I always had to fight for any opportunity, and just if I would have had a better understanding on again like how to build, whether it be confidence or mental toughness or why mistakes actually have value and why taking risks is important. It just would have made that much easier for me. And that's something that I think really drives me when I look to help different players these days.
And so, especially like once you're getting into this space, and I think you were pretty zoned in on sports instantly. Like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, you grew up on teams, you were able to experience sport, but I guess like what is that one thing? I mean, everybody's vision of sport is different. I mean, especially if you're playing an individual sport rather than a team sport. But I know for me, I know Riles is probably the same way. Like, we're biased because it's hockey, but hockey is just it's so fascinating to watch a group be able to come together over a season or not be able to come together. It is very interesting to look back on your teams and to see the progress, to see the growth within individuals within that team. So I guess what drew you to sport originally? What was it like? Is there certain values in sport where you're like, I'd like to continue to kind of focus in on those values? Is there something that, I guess going back to your days, like, was there certain moments where you can reflect on and be like, that's something I definitely wish I would have known more about the values that come along with this sport? I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question, but I guess that's kind of where my head goes.
Yeah. In terms of why I'm drawn to sport, I think it's just been something I've always been passionate about. You know what? I never really had to be forced to go do those extra skates, and obviously I had the privilege and the accessibility to play a lot of hockey on top of just the regular registration. So for me, it was just always a passion, and I think back to some of my earliest memories. Hockey night in Canada, Matt Sundin on the Leafs, right? Like, I'm really going back here. I'm aging myself a little bit.
Are you a Toronto guy? Like, are you from the Toronto area?
Yeah, I'm from the
Yeah.
GTA. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So grew up just about 45, 50 minutes north of Toronto for most of my life. And so, yeah, so I think that's one of the things that just I was always drawn to in that perspective. But
And so I guess like to follow up, that was kind of a stupid question. Anyways, I want to follow up and just see like, you know, now that you are focused in on sport, is there? I've seen that you work with younger kids. I've seen that you work with NCAA athletes over
yeah.
this little course lately. Is there a certain age group that you want to key in on, or are you kind of just
Oh,
like
okay.
I like to learn about an NCAA athlete struggles as much as I like to learn about a U13 kid struggles? Like, is there, obviously you're going to learn so much from each age group, but
Mhm.
now that you're in it, do you want to key in or focus in on a certain age range or demographic or anything?
A good question. Yeah, I'd say probably resonate best with adolescent athletes. So whether that be, U14, 15 and up, right up to, junior college and even into pro. But I think there's so many lessons and so many values you can really learn from the younger kids. Like, some of the greatest things I've learned from kids are some of the things they say. Like, I learned from a U12 player or a U13 player. They just see the game so much differently. I was even talking with one athlete recently, and he mentioned to me that sometimes it's hard to have fun because when parents are taking it too seriously in the crowd, right? And or how it becomes really challenging when you have a coach and a parent telling you two different things, right? Like, you have maybe a parent I'm sure they have the best interests of their kids in mind. They're not trying to do any harm, but when you have a parent telling you to do one thing and then a coach telling you to do another thing, it becomes challenging, right? So yeah, sorry, long-winded way of saying I do like adolescent and older is what I really zone in on. But I have worked with and continue to work with plenty of U12, 13 players, and sometimes
It's
younger.
it's got to be a bit of like a different approach too to the conversations, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
from that young age, it seemed like to me, it seems like hockey, like playing hockey at a very high level, where like say the kid's dream is to play in the NHL. It's just like it's a really hard thing to achieve. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to keep your doors open to other things too, right? And that's a hard message I feel like to send across to a kid who really is trying to push. And to me, like when I was reading your background and it was talking about like professional of all the way down, I just thought right away, like, I wonder how he approaches the different conversations and what his pillars are that he like leans on as he goes into those conversations based off the age that he's
Mm-hmm.
talking to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's definitely different working with really young athletes opposed to adolescent and pro from my experiences. With younger athletes, you have to have some more energy, be more upbeat, kind of be a little more fun. Older athletes conversations tend to be a little more serious, more collected. I just find they typically respond to different levels of energy in that way. But in terms of those pillars, though, honestly, a lot of the different strategies I use, I teach the same way. I might explain it differently, or for younger athletes, I might draw it out more. But one big message that I always come back to, no matter the athlete, is athletes need to stop waiting to feel confident to get things done.
Yeah.
Athletes waiting to feel confident holds them back, because you guys both know, you guys have both played hockey at a high level. If you wait until you feel confident to do something, then you'll never get anything done at all.
Yeah.
Or maybe I shouldn't assume. What do you guys agree with that, or do
No,
you?
it's so crazy too, because as soon as I looked at like your page and some stuff about like risk taking, and I saw one clip of Donnie Granado, who's like such an amazing coach in person. It's not the clip that applies to this topic, but the one I'm thinking of is when he talks about Tage Thompson, and
Mhm.
what the message that he told Tage about, like, Tomer, you're a goal scorer in this league, but like, don't wait for it to happen. You are, like, go out there and do it. And when you apply it to risk taking, like, I know for me, like, as soon as I do something on the ice that translates into a goal scoring chance, or something exciting happens,
Mhm.
I feel like I'm in the game and my confidence shoots up, and then I'm in that flow state, and and the game becomes way easier. But if I'm in a game where I'm like just doing the safe thing every time and playing responsible, which is fine, like, I'm not gonna get in trouble for anything, but I'm also like losing out on opportunities to show what I can do and
Mhm.
feel good playing and enjoy it. So those are some of the things that stuck out to me. And when you talk about risk taking, it for sure, it's a fine line though, right? Like, you can't be
Mhm.
too much of a risk taker where now it's starting to hold your game. So does that come into play in your sessions, like how to balance risk taking versus too much of it where you're now hurting the team?
All the time, honestly, all the time. And it's interesting because, like you said, you don't want to play super risky where you're throwing pizzas up the middle multiple times a game and turning pucks over all the time. But it's that fine balance where you're smart about when you do take your risks. And this concept of risk taking comes from a friend of mine and a mentor, Dr. Cassidy Preston, where he talks about how there's 4 zones to risk taking. And it starts with too safe and gradually works from more safe to smart assertive and too risky. And so, ideally, for athletes to make their greatest impact, you want to be in that smart assertive zone where when you see an opportunity, you take the opportunity, and also sometimes dip your foot into being too risky, because we have to accept that, yeah, you're going to have really bad turnovers sometimes. You might be on the wrong side of the highlight reel, but if you're never willing to take those risks, you're ultimately limiting your potential impact. And so, really, what is more risky? Riley, I know you were just talking about it a bit here, where it's like, sure, you won't necessarily get noticed for the wrong reasons, but you also are limiting your impact, right? If you never take risks. So what's more risky? Is it the long term effects of never taking risks, or is it those odd moments where maybe you really mess up? And in my mind, I always have to, in the way I approach it, is it hurts you a lot long term. And that's something that's really hard, I find, for a lot of athletes to grasp. However, they have to seriously recognize that making mistakes is okay. And part of that onus is also on the coaches and parents to understand that as well. Because, I could be in a session with an athlete and explain to them, why playing more risky is important and how it can help you. But if you have coaches and parents telling them, "Oh, don't make mistakes today. We have to have mistake-free hockey. You can't mess up. This is a must-win game." Oftentimes, the work I do can just get thrown out the window.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I got a question that kind of relates to risk, kind of doesn't, but I want to talk about COVID. Like I've been fortunate to now, you know, coached for the past couple of years, 11 and 12-year-olds. And I don't know if you find this the same, but obviously the youth, I think, was more deeply impacted by COVID and more deeply impacted, whether it's socially, whether it's, confidence based, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem. I think there is a lot that now I understand more about how, that time away from the rink, that time away from that social aspect in the dressing room, that time away from all of that really did. It's a profound effect on these kids that are still trying to, figure it out themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
how, I guess obviously you would have had some work maybe before COVID, and now,
Yep.
even after COVID, working especially with these younger kids, like how do you begin to offer that reassurance and offer that confidence that they need? Because I know from my experience, like I don't know what it is, but I do find that our youth needs a little bit more reassurance that,
Mm-hmm.
they are allowed to make mistakes, and they are allowed to go out there and have fun, and they are allowed to be themselves, and they are allowed to, just be them and make mistakes and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how do you find that COVID has impacted, especially our youth in the game?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something I actually haven't been asked in a while. So I really appreciate that question. You know, one thing that I tend to come back to a lot is just how much of the prime development years were taken away from a lot of kids, during COVID. And particularly how that can harm, kids that are working towards those specialization years of, you 14, 15, 16, where there's kids that want to play at a high level because they want to get noticed, but then they took a whole year off of hockey, and then they get onto a AAA team per se, and they're not playing much. And so for me, a lot of it is about just some kids I think are just going to be behind because they haven't had the opportunity to make those mistakes and to get those reps in. And so to me, a lot of it is going to be about skill development, but then also just about making sure that these kids are playing. Like I'm curious what you guys have to say about this, but you don't have to play AAA when you're 13, 14. To me,
No,
oftentimes it's far better off for a kid to play AA, play in all situations, than play 3 shifts in a game in AAA.
I like that, and I couldn't agree more on the fact that, wherever you end up after tryouts, I think it's important to just still value your development, and especially if you
Yeah.
are getting more ice time, more opportunity. And now I kind of want to flip the coin and ask you, it relates to this, but even like other sports. I mean, we've
Okay.
had quite a few conversations with people about other sports, and I know now, I don't know, I don't want to relate it to even just like me growing up, but I mean, I played lacrosse. I had buddies that played spring hockey. I had buddies that played baseball. I mean, it is interesting now, and I don't know if I just see it the one way now, where it's like it's hockey, 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 hockey.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you at with wanting these kids to develop their other skills and wanting these kids to go out and try other sports and try new things and meet new people? And because I think that's a big thing compared to the confidence aspect of it as well,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're submersing yourself in these different locker rooms and you're submersing yourself in this different sport that requires different skills, then I just think that builds your Rolodex even more. But that's just me, so I don't know what's your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on that.
Yeah. I, I have different thoughts on it, and really depends on the age of the athlete. Now, I don't know this like that. I don't know this model like the back of my hand, but I know there's some research posted by Dr. Jean Cote and some other colleagues where they talk about the specialization years versus the sampling years for athletes. And when athletes are really young, they should be playing a lot of sports. And when it comes to trying to get to the elite level, play athletes shouldn't really be, or hockey, just stick to hockey. Hockey players really shouldn't be specializing until they're U15, U16. They should be playing multiple sports for many reasons, whether it be to reduce risk of burnout, reduce risk of overuse injuries, improve athleticism, to, have more fun and try new things. Because if you always do the same thing, how are you ever going to really know if that's what you're going to like the most? And, I get it. Like growing up for me, like I was always hockey, hockey, hockey. And, I wanted to play 3-on-3 hockey in the summer, and, I had a lot of fun. But honestly, I wish I would have played baseball or would have played more soccer, because not only would it have just made me a better athlete, but I also think it would have made me a better hockey player.
For sure.
Mm.
Do you find you mentioned something about burnout, like how common of a topic is that? Like, especially now, like I mean, we're talking about playing multiple sports, but like I feel like it's just not not as common anymore. And a lot of it, I don't like, maybe it's parenting pushing their kid in, like seeing the Connor McDavid role or the John Tavares pathway where
Mm-hmm.
these, like they were just phenoms. But I wonder like how often that's a topic of conversation where kids are coming to you and just saying like, I'm really just not enjoying the game right now because I'm a little bit tired of it. Like it's just kind of getting a little mundane for me.
Mm-hmm. It certainly comes up from time to time. Just I think the other thing too is just because of how much pressure is put on a lot of youth athletes these days to perform, and youth sport is getting so professionalized, in my opinion. Like, I don't want to get into it too much, but you just see the way youth sport is framed these days versus what it was like when I was growing up or you guys were growing up. Um, so I think a lot of it is you just have to remind kids that hockey should be fun, and obviously you guys know this. Once you get to a certain level, it's not always going to be fun, and elite sport is not always fun. But as they're growing up, it's just important for them to just make sure they're enjoying the game and understanding that there's no harm in taking a break. There's no harm in having to recharge. It's just similar to there's an analogy where we wouldn't let our phone get to 1% most of the time, but why do we wait for ourselves to get to 1% or 0% to make something happen?
That's a
Wow.
great. I've never heard that before. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
good. It's a good segue because we wanted to talk to you about professionals taking a break or like NBA load management. Like it
Mm-hmm.
seems like it's ruffling a lot of feathers in the sports world, and it seems like a lot of those people that are bothered by it are maybe a bit like old school mindset. And I also like I'm unsure sometimes of coming up with an opinion on it because I understand what they're doing. Like it's some games you just are so out of it and you just go through the motions and it's probably dangerous. That's when you get hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know for myself, my first year pro, I had to take a step back for a weekend because I had bad anxiety, like I was having panic attacks, and I just couldn't handle. I knew I couldn't go and play, so I told my agent. He told the Red Wings, and I ended up taking a break for a weekend. And I just said I had like a stomach flu, and that's what the team told the guys, but they knew what was going on. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess like it's interesting to see where the mental health space is going in sports, and it's also at the same time I feel like it's a hard thing for people to get on the same page because you're still going to have a lot of people saying these guys signed up for it, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time like this might improve the pace of play, this might improve the lives of these guys, and maybe we won't see as many problems post career. So I wonder what your thoughts are on like the load management things and all the different stories coming out now of guys taking breaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to remember too that science has come a long way since maybe the old days, and so if teams are making evidence-based decisions, and they believe that that's going to help the athlete not only thrive, whether it be on the ice or on the pitch or on the court, but also just help them live happier and healthier lives, because that's something that gets lost a lot, is the fact that athletes are human. As much as
Yeah.
we may believe athletes are superhuman because of the incredible things they can do in their sport, they are human at the end of the day. They have responsibilities. They, just like we do, they got to go get groceries. They have to pay their bills. They have to do all those things. And so to me, I don't have an issue with load management if it's something an athlete really needs, and by all means. And even Riley, on that note, you were saying about when you had to take a break with the Red Wings, you're starting to see more athletes be more open to those realities of needing to step away from the game. I believe it was the Penguins prospect, was it Poulin, who took a
Yeah,
break
Poulin.
recently because of his anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So, and stories like that, and the courage of those athletes to come out and say that outright, just makes it, really normalizes the conversations and makes other athletes feel like it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And a guy like Poulin, who was a first round pick not that long ago.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
so. I say it in my speaking quite a bit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
mental health, mental fitness, mental skills. I mean, it's a it's an uncomfortable space. It's difficult, it's challenging. You know, you're bringing your vulnerability out. You're wanting to work on something that you don't normally work on. It's hard for a lot of athletes, especially to, you know, break into that space and want to break into that space and want to have those conversations.
Mm.
What is it? I mean, coming from a performance coach, coming from that side of things, and you know, working with the front necks. I mean, what is it on your end that you hope that other psychologists and mental performance coaches are doing, especially with athletes? I think, I mean, I read a bunch of your testimonials, and it seems as though communication's big for you. You know, developing that trust early. But what is it that, at least for you, do you hope that, you know, for your clients especially, but other people as well, like what do you hope that these conversations are bringing about? What are you trying to
Mm-hmm.
develop at an early on, especially when these athletes are hesitant about going into this space?
To me, the very start of the work is all about rapport building and just really building that relationship and that trust. Because there's going to be, you're going to have athletes who have different opinions and different views on you know how open they are about their work. Like some athletes wouldn't really care if people knew they worked with a mental performance coach. Others would not want a single other soul knowing. And so really respecting their confidentiality and building that trust and that rapport is easily the most important thing at the start, in my opinion. Now, as I continue to do the work and build that relationship, something that I'm very big on personally in my work is I want my athletes to know that I always have their back, and that if they ever need anything, and seriously, they can shoot me a text and give me a call, because it's important for them to know that. Because oftentimes you have athletes who sometimes feel like they're on an island and that they don't have that support system. You know, maybe they've moved away from home, or maybe something's going on. So uh, to me, again, the building relationships, building that rapport is important at the very start. And I feel like just about any mental performance coach would tell you the same thing. But also just having athletes know that you have their back if they need something, I think does wonders for the quality of the sessions, and really just the quality of the work. If it's personally I've talked about, but have you guys ever had, you know, experiences with mental performance coaches on the teams you've played on, or?
I I never have really used someone through the team, which was just like a personal decision. I use like sports psychologists outside of the team. I use a life coach now, who now is he's works with probably 10 to 15 other NHL players. I never really was intimidated by letting my coaches know, because my first experience went really, really well. Like right when like I said, I had this weekend where I stepped back. I was in Grand Rapids, like part of the Wings organization, but Mike Babcock was the head coach. Um, and when I told the staff that I had this issue and that I was dealing with some things, I went to a psychologist. He told me that sounds like I was dealing with some depression. They were all hands on supportive. They didn't use it against me in any way. I ended up getting called up, and the next year I was playing with the Red Wings full time, and Babs actually was very like hands on with what was going on. And I know Babs has a sports psychology background, and I know there's obviously too some negative things about him, but for me it was really refreshing knowing my coach was willing to work with me, and also like I felt value in that, and it helped me perform better, and it helped me feel more comfortable. And he would bring me in for meetings and check in on me, which made me feel more comfortable. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, that's what you want out of your athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
mean,
it was good.
I mean, I never played high enough hockey where we had a mental performance coach or any of that shit. But
You don't have one right now with your beer league team.
oh man, I wish. No,
Bring me out. Bring me
yeah.
out.
Yeah, can we pay in beer? Yeah. I mean, I work with a psychologist, and or I guess a therapist, and I think even for me, I think the biggest thing is, you know, like making that appointment. And like I think it probably relates to your athletes as well. Like the hardest hurdle for a lot of people is just like actually taking the time to like make that appointment and like sending that email and making that phone
Mm-hmm.
call. And then obviously once it's booked, it's like, okay, well, it's booked. Like I need to hold myself accountable and I need to go. But it's interesting because I actually just got an email from my therapist yesterday, And same thing. I mean, she was like, I'm super proud of you. I just listened to a podcast with you, and I just want you to know that I'm still here and my door is always open. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that is just like, oh, like it's so good to hear from you. And I'm sorry that I haven't maybe been around as much, and I am, but that's exactly what it's all about. It's just like that open communication and that open door policy. And I mean, she's amazing, and she's somebody that, I'll forever hold such fond memories of, because she was able to bring me out of my shell and do a lot for me. And not just
Mhm.
because of hockey, but just because of obviously life and trauma as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't got much else on that, but it's just it is fascinating how much, that communication, but also like that good challenging. I think, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think there is a certain amount of challenging these athletes and challenging these patients or challenging these individuals. I think that really does come into play. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that, I find as though my therapist did such a good job of, when I would go on a tangent or I would ramble on about something, she would look me in the eyes and just challenge me in that space and challenge me in that moment. And I don't know if that's something that you like to do as well with your kids, but I think there is a healthy amount of, you know, healthy amount of, okay, I'm going to challenge you right now. And I think there is growth
Mhm.
that can come in that. So I don't know if you want to touch on that.
So I actually love that. And I think there's a lot of value in challenging your athletes. And that actually ties really well back to the importance of building relationships and building rapport. Because when you do that and you build that trust and you have that relationship, that makes it that much easier for athletes to be open and receptive to having difficult conversations. Imagine the first time you meet your therapist or your mental performance coach, they're challenging everything you say. It's athletes are probably more likely to get defensive and withdraw, and but versus if you have that relationship and you can have those more difficult conversations, um just makes the work that much easier. So definitely there's a time and a place to challenge your athletes and clients, and I think it's important to be perhaps selective about when that is. But if you can do it in a healthy amount and ensure that you have pretty good rapport before you do that, um, in my opinion, it can do wonders.
Are you a reader at all? You must be. You must, right? Am I?
I
Would that
love
be
reading.
wrong of me to presume? But yeah,
No,
yeah.
no. Did 6 years of school. I hope
I
I
was
like
gonna
reading.
say, yeah, I was gonna say that would be. This is kind of a
Yeah.
dumb question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Okay.
What my life coach recommended a book that stuck with me, and I don't want to say changed my life, but that's pretty dramatic. But it definitely allowed me to sort of take a look in the mirror, and I learned some good tools from it. Leadership and self deception, it's called. I don't know if
Okay.
you've ever read that one, but the basis of it is just like how much your brain wants to be right in so many
Mm-hmm.
situations. So when like you aren't playing well, your brain goes right to like, well, it's my coach's fault. He's not playing me enough, or it's my line mate's fault because they aren't finding me enough. And it's so and so's fault, whatever, whatever. Rather than like learning, it's hard to do, but you learn to sort of start feeding your brain more positive food, and you kind of focus in on yourself and what you can do to make the situation better. Communicate with your line mates more. Tell your coach maybe
Mm-hmm.
some things that you're thinking, rather than just building these thoughts up in your own head about how he's perceiving you, and then starting to hate him for it, or starting to think he's like he's taking something out on you, or he's treating you some type of way. And it really
Mm-hmm.
like it really was interesting because those things happen so much, and I'm sure you hear that a lot of conversation about like, I'm not getting enough ice time, and I'm not playing with the guys that I want to play. So it
Mm-hmm.
is nice to hear that that's a focal point for you, that maybe sometimes, I mean, it's a tough way of putting, like, take a look in the mirror, it could be you, but it's the case a lot of times. So I like that.
So Riles has left us. But at the end of the day, I think Riles and I just appreciate the fact that you are doing what you're doing, and I think that is a profound thing because, like we said before, youth sports is it's gone crazy, and I mean there's a lot to it, and the fact that you are willing to work with these kids, and not just kids, I mean NCAA athletes as well. I mean they're going through it, and it's I can't even imagine playing at that level, and but I know that Riles and I, you covered everything, man, and we just really appreciate the fact that you came on and you wanted to come on and appreciate what you're doing, especially with just in your work in the mental health space, because we touched on it. I mean, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but the fact that you have a love for this and the love for the mental skills and a love for the fact of, yes, hockey is predominantly a physical sport. There's a lot of mental that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not at a good state mentally, and if your well-being is not well, then I mean, you know it, you deal with these athletes. I just hope that these kids are taking the time to take care of themselves. And I think the biggest thing is we appreciate what you're doing. So, I mean, Taylor, once again, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us.
Oh, pleasure is mine. Thank you as well. You and Riley are both doing great work yourselves, and you guys just keep doing what you guys are doing, and I'm sure it's only up from here. So appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to listening to this once it's posted.
Much love, brother. Appreciate it.